Hey guys, welcome to Wealth Wisdom Financial, podcast, Mark Willis's YouTube channel. I don't know, whatever. We're just doing a banking yourself live. We're going to talk about some good, fun things in the world, and I'm gonna chill out this music.
I love that beat, man. That sick beat.
Yeah, the music is. We figured might as well add it. There's all these fun things you could add here. So guys, thank you for joining us to our monthly lives. I think monthly or biweekly. I don't know. Whenever we're trying to do more of them, and what I love about this is we are just kind of being real here. There's a lot of craziness happening in the world, so we're gonna talk about headlines, not political headlines. So you can go ahead and put political drama in there, but we're not going to listen to that as much. But today. While you're here, don't forget, hit the like, put a comment, ask questions, because you got a bunch of us here, right? So hit that thumbs up. I got Mr. Mark Willis here, and Mark runs Not Your Average Financial Podcast. Then we have Miss Amanda Neely, who is I know quite well, and then we have a new guy. Mr. Evan Greathouse. So Evan is also a banking yourself professional and is really, really smart and does a lot of fun real estate stuff. So one day we might talk about real estate. So anyway, again, you guys, thanks for joining. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button, put comments there. Love to engage with you guys.
So good to see you guys. Yeah, it's kind of a relief just hanging out together. Love it. Well, we have so much stuff to do. I'm gonna do a quick high-level table of contents, you might say, for folks so they know what's coming. We got some macroeconomic financial markets happening. We're going to be talking about what the Fed is going to be doing, the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell, the grand poobah of the economic universe. We're going to be talking about how Americans are working on their biggest problem, which might or might not be inflation. We're going to be looking at how home prices are soaring, according to Freddie Mac, and what that means for everyday buyers. We're going to be looking at, speaking of, a $17 trillion problem for all of us, if you're in the U.S. We're going to be talking about, even while all that madness is going on, what the S&P is doing, because he's having his own little party by himself over there in the corner. And, oh, by the way, with the Dow and NASDAQ as well. And then we're going to get into some personal financial headlines as well. The retirement crisis is even worse than you think. This is just crazy to me. I can't wait to get into some of this for you guys. Even as the stock market is booming, we're in a crisis of retirement. Something's not working there. U.S. adults, half of them, we say, are going to be having some trouble understanding financial jargon. And I can understand why, but we're going to get into that. Some other big trends in personal finance, and is college really worth it? So stick around to the end. We're going to be, I think, blowing the barn doors off of some myths and, some myths around how college is working, whether it's still a good deal or not.
I think we also, I found an article on something that happened just last Friday, that had some big impacts. Okay. Do you guys remember what happened?
You're going to tease us? Friday? Yeah, go for it, man. What's going on?
We'll sneak that in.
Sneak it in. We'll sneak it in.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you guys remember Friday?
Last Friday? There were airlines down. Nobody could log into their investment accounts. It was a pretty big deal last Friday.
Maybe was talking about Windows.
Yep. Yeah. Some people are still trying to make it home or make it to their destination. I hear.
Well, so it all, and I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but I'd say more powerful than a speeding train, more mighty than a firing bullet, is the most powerful person in the world, in my opinion, is this guy named Jerome, and Mr. Powell. And right or wrong, he is leading up the Federal Reserve. And as the chairman, he speaks and people listen. So every so often, once a month or so, the Fed gets together and they discuss where things are headed. And, if we don't really have a whole lot of religious priests leading our country. There's not a lot of like weird, like reading the tea leaves or like defining the entrails of a sacrificed goat in this country. But we do listen very carefully. We read the tea leaves of our Federal Reserve, high priestess, or high priest, I should say. So CNBC writes that the Federal Reserve says that rates will stay high for longer to curb inflation. So this is as of CNBC's source here, and it says in the article, restoring price stability is essential to achieving both our dual mandate goals. This is Jerome Powell. Now, pop quiz: what are the dual mandate goals of the Federal Reserve? Anybody know?
Keep our money rolling. I don't know, business going, and keep people
Velocity.
buying. Is that
filling? That's what the two mandates are. Great taste, less filling. You guys, no, nobody. Okay, nobody remember that commercial? Okay,
No.
All right.
buy more stuff. Buy more stuff.
I mean, I do know, like, there's some history to why the Fed is so not transparent. It's because it used to be more transparent. And then I believe in the 1980s, it was somebody by the name of Allen who said something wrong, totally bumbled a speech, and the market went crazy, the stock market. And so, like, since then, they've been very cautious, very, like, they have to be, like, that's not always been true. I'm a history nerd. I was reading that for, and then their mandate also changes sometimes. So Mark, tell us, what's their mandate right now? What do they claim their mandate is?
Yeah. Well, since they got the act from Congress to become an entity and sort of a quasi-governmental entity, the dual mandate is price stability and low unemployment. So high employment and price stability, in other words. And so part of the problem is we're looking at the Fed saying, come on, man, this inflation thing is killing us and price stability is not there, right? Now, we can have a whole nother discussion around the fact that we are losing, and I saw this the other day, this is according to U.S. Gallup poll, 1% of our dollar's value is being lost every 30 days right now. 1% of our dollar's cost value is being lost every 30 days. So again, Mr. Powell's quote says, restoring price stability, it's one of their mandates, is essential to achieving both of our dual mandate goals. So he's referring to the goals of maximum employment and stable prices. We will need price stability to achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. So I want to know, why does anybody want to take a stab at this? Why does price stability help both mandates? Like, what does price stability have to do with high employment? Anybody have a guess on that?
People buy more stuff.
No, theoretically, if I'm selling widgets and my prices are high, I'm making enough money to pay my employees well. Mm-hmm. That's the theory. Now, what they actually do in practice is stock buybacks and CEO compensation and bonuses. And so it's not always the case, but that's at least the theory, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And two, what is employment? It's a cost, isn't it, for the employer? So if there's a wage price spiral, as they say, the more prices go up, the more you got to pay people to live. The more you pay people to live, the higher your prices go up. So when you can tamp down inflation, typically that means you, as an employer, can hire more people. That's the theory anyway. So I don't know. There's a lot going into this topic, and I know it's our first topic. We have a lot of ground to cover. But when you have an election coming up, when you have a lot of people upset about inflation, which we'll talk about coming up next, what do you think about like this idea that rates aren't coming down anytime soon? I thought this was supposed to be transitory inflation, Evan. What do you think?
It's going to be interesting to see how, it really affects things like the real estate markets, having people have loans and school loans, especially student debt, mortgages. Those are going to have a really incredible impact on just everything, because with interest rates being high also and inflation being high, it just really makes a recipe for just stagnation, people standing still. I think a lot of people are standing still in those markets anyways, and it's it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how his most recent comments about an extended interest rate, hike is going to impact all of that.
So this is an open question for everybody. And also in the comments, please leave a comment below this video and let us know your thoughts. Here's my question. Are they bluffing? Can the Fed lower rates, or are they out of ammunition? Because if they lower rates, guess what happens to inflation?
Yep.
Well, and there's also a difference between price increases and inflation. Those are not always the same thing, right?
True.
Like during COVID, we had a lot of price increases, but that was not exactly inflation. It's because of supply chain, crisis, things like that. And in fact, like I love to use real estate as I'm kind of being a devil's advocate today. If you can't
I
tell,
love it.
I'm a little spicy. Real estate's a great example. The cost of wood skyrocketed before the pandemic. Why? The research I've seen that shows why the price of wood skyrocketed way before the pandemic, way before supply chain, was because of concentration in the wood market. All these wood companies became one company, and that company could set their prices. And they had nobody to undercut them, nobody to set the prices lower.
I liked what you did there with the undercut. That's pretty good.
Yeah, puns are intended.
Now,
So like there's it's not just about the Fed and the power that they have, but also the power that can come when we have fewer suppliers, fewer companies, right? And the power that they can have to determine the prices no matter what else is happening, no matter what Jerome says.
good stuff.
Well, and I think as a business owner and having our former coffee shop, if I could raise prices and blame something else and make more profit, wouldn't I do that? Right. And so people would always complain every year whenever we would raise it by a nickel. Right. Because things do go up in price. But if I can blame something else, and it wasn't because I was greedy, it was just because the cost went up. But if I could, even if costs didn't go up and I could blame something else, wouldn't I do that as a smart business person?
So I'll push on this a little bit. So let's say you guys had the only coffee shop, and for those that don't know, Amanda and Brandon were rock star coffee shop owners before they became Bank on Yourself professionals, and I got to drink their delicious coffee every morning on my way to my office down the hall. That was awesome. So let's say that you guys had the only coffee house in your zip code, downtown Chicago. Couldn't you charge basically what you wanted, right? Because that's a long way to go for another guy's cup of coffee, right? Now let's say Evan comes in and he figures out a way to bring in coffee every morning, puts up a little stand in your zip code for 5 cents less than yours. Even though you have a monopoly in your zip code, Evan, you can walk in with your coffee and bring it in and lower the price. So this is why I say it's cronyism, not capitalism, that brings the problems, right? It's not capitalism that's causing the trouble. It's it's the it's the people who say you can't open a coffee shop here unless you are, Big Bob's coffee machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the cronyism, I think, that causes some of the price increases, not to mention the supply of money, which went up. And we'll talk about this in 2020. Even before the pandemic, Trump was pumping up the inflation game because he was pushing so much, keeping the rates low, like a good mortgage expert, like a good real estate guy. But I want to hear from Evan, and then we got to move on to the next topic. You remember those days where timber was going nuts because you were doing real estate. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I was actually working for one of my buddies who owns a real estate investment firm, and we were developing houses. And he had, maybe 15 or 20 houses that he was in the middle of building. And I had another friend who even had 50 houses that he had currently in the works and he was building. And they were trying to get them knocked out as fast as possible because they just saw the price of lumber skyrocketing. Um, and what ended up happening was a lot of builders out, and I'm in Nashville, for those of you who don't know, a lot of builders out here ended up getting stuck with these, $500,000-$600,000 houses that, they had budgeted that they would be able to sell them for 500 or 600,000, but their cost ended up going up drastically in a very short amount of time, in just the 9 months that it took them to build that house, or 4 or 6 months, or however long it took. But that impact, it kept them from being able to sell that. A lot of people struggled really bad in that time. So yeah, it was a rough minute there. So in the real estate market, at least for Nashville, I'm sure it was like that in a lot of different areas.
Yeah. And what I like about your example is those guys would have bought wood at a cheaper price if they could find it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just impossible to find at that time. And that's when, like, taxi drivers in New York had a monopoly for a really long time until Uber came in. Like that's kind of nature of things. But then also, Milton Friedman would say of the capitalist, if you can raise your prices, you better do it because you owe it to your stakeholders, your stockholders, right? So we have this kind of tension that we're always living in, and that causes a lot of emotions. So I'm going to pass it back to Mark to talk about the emotional side of this.
Oh, great segue, Amanda. Yeah. So the next topic, and I don't know who's taking this one. I think, is this one Amanda's? It says Americans continue to name inflation as the top financial problem. And this is a Gallup poll that reveals that inflation is still the number one top concern. So for everything else going on in this crazy world right now, you walking down the aisle of the grocery store means more to your pocketbook than, say, some distant war or something else going on in the news, cultural wars or whatever else. So are you guys seeing this with your clients? Your Bank on Yourself professionals here. Are you hearing conversations around inflation? And if so, what's that like?
Absolutely. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and the words he used was, inflation makes me seethingly mad, like seethingly angry. And that's a direct quote.
Wow.
And it really should, honestly, because this particular individual saves diligently, has been working really hard, is very disciplined, very, healthy as far as like his risk averse and everything. Is he leans more conservative on his approach. And he's getting punished because of other people's, decisions, and there's not anything that anybody can really do about it. So as far as that goes, like it is popping up left and right. It is causing all kinds of people to have difficulties with saving and everything. There's, for retirement years now. I think Mark, you may have spoken about it recently, that there are more updated researches that are showing, instead of $1 million for retirement, it's now like $2 million that needs to be saved up for retirement in order to not run out of money before you die. That's, and even then you still have like a 50% chance of making it. So
totally.
Yeah.
And I would go back to some of our other stuff, but let's be honest, inflation has been happening, but we haven't really seen it as much if it's in college or in medical cost, right? It's been increasing over years, but we never, like, till you have to go to the doctor for something and you're like, wait, that used to cost me 10,000 and now it costs me 100,000. We don't really pay attention until it's us.
So notice, what are you seeing on that chart there, Amanda? What do you see that's important for us to pull out?
Well, so like I was going through these and it's showing like how much Americans say that inflation is the most important problem that they're facing. And then it shows like other problems they list and how inflation compares, right? High cost of living, inflation. And then this shows it's all subgroups. Age, right? Doesn't matter. This shows income, right? Lower income and higher income. Everybody's experiencing inflation as the most important problem.
Wow. You go back up to the bar chart, the most important financial problem facing U.S. families there. There you go. Look down about halfway down the page. What do you guys see? What pops out at you?
Interest rates we were just talking about.
Interest rates. And then what else? Life insurance right underneath that, right?
Yeah.
So here's an interesting fact. What's one thing in your budget, and I kind of gave it away, that will never, guaranteed, never go up with inflation once you buy it? you lock in the price for the rest of your life. Oh yeah, dividend paying whole life insurance. The one thing that will never change in your budget will be the premium on your policy. It's the only thing that I'm aware of. Help me if I'm mistaken. I mean, a mortgage maybe, but even then you got property taxes that's going to change, and the homeowner's insurance might change on you. But a lifetime of premium payments that never get, bumped up with inflation. So that's my claim. Now, wait a minute. I just said that, but we're looking at a 3% rise here. What's the problem with that? Anybody want to take a guess? Why is there a 3% raise if I just said that premiums don't go up?
I would ask, what kind of policy are you talking about? Maybe one.
Good question. Yeah, what kind of life insurance are we talking about here? Also,
Does it have anything to do with like policy loan rates or anything?
good guess, but no. I'll give you the answer. The answer is who bought last year versus this year. So if you were lucky enough and smart enough to start your policy last year, you got a 3% discount over what it would cost you to buy the same policy this year. Again, once you buy your policy, it's locked in. You don't have that creeping cost of living nibbling away at your dollars. In fact, due to inflation, you actually have an easier time paying your premiums once you buy your policy. So this is my request. Guys, start your bank on yourself policy right now before inflation takes a bigger bite and makes it harder for you to buy one next year.
And then throw into that you're also a year older.
You're a year older. That's right.
So it's probably more than 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there's a two-edged sword to all this. Like, one is that you have to start saving more and more. But yeah, like you pointed out, paying for your whole life policy, premium is going to be a lot easier. What's also a lot easier to pay? Does anybody know? Debt.
Yeah.
Debt's also easier to pay as inflation creeps up. So, if it was me, and it is me as well, I'm using this as an opportunity to really crank down on consumer debt or mortgage debt or any kind of debt that I've got from real estate investments or anything, and just knocking it out while we can, so that once inflation does come back down, it is going to allow even more buying power at that point. So more cash flow.
Great stuff, Evan. All right, Brandon, I want you to tell us about this Black Swan event. They all seem to be black swans these days. Where are the white swans? Bring back the normal swans, right? So, Brandon, what happened last week that might impact everyone's retirement?
I don't know if it would impact everyone's, but I was reminded of a friend of mine, Perry Marshall, had told us back before COVID happened. I think it was maybe just after. He said more black swan events are going to happen, right? Meaning things that we didn't think could happen, like a barge getting stuck that causes us to raise prices, right? That happened a few years ago that we forgot about. Or I didn't think we were going to talk about politics, but we did have somebody attempt to be attempted shooting, right? That raised stock prices in one area on one of their things. And then last week, Microsoft had a glitch of some sort. And so, I mean, if you want to share that article, but it is really, what was it? Game or not game? I'm thinking GameStop. That was another one as a black swan. But it's things that we didn't think were going to happen or weren't going to think about in the morning. All of a sudden impacts us, right? And so this was because somebody did something maybe in a code, took down airlines, took down half of Microsoft. We had some vendors that we had to deal with, and I'm wondering, like, if this CrowdStrike, I think their stocks went down a lot. So maybe we didn't see volatility in our overall picture, but if you were invested in CrowdStrike and that happened, you saw some volatility and you have to recover from that, right? And so those may not impact all of us, but be aware of what you're putting your money in. If you're in 401ks or in the market in some area, and you might say, hey, well, CrowdStrike is the best thing to be in forever. Well, until something like this happens. Anything you guys would add there?
A lot of
Five point
companies
four
are
billion.
losing a ton of money. Yeah, not just CrowdStrike either. It's like, Windows is losing like hundreds of millions of dollars, I think that article said. And,
5.4
Delta
billion.
Airlines. Yeah, Delta Airlines, and everybody's having to push surgeries. It's not just affecting us financially, it's also affecting health and anxiety and wellness, and all of that is coming into play.
Right
Yeah.
before this live call, I was talking to a gentleman who told me that this week he was getting ready to roll over some significant cash into a annuity that we had set up for him, a Roth IRA annuity, so getting a guaranteed tax-free retirement income. He was pretty pumped about, but he was bummed when I talked to him because in between last week and this week when we spoke, he had lost $50,000, which is a big chunk of his money, and he didn't know what to do, or he was frustrated that this sort of thing can just happen outside of your control. Like you said, Brett, you just wake up one morning and poof, the money's gone. That just that brings it home from a $5 billion loss from Microsoft or whatever down to 50 grand that you're not going to have in retirement, and you can never get that money back, even if the market recovers. That's a loss you'll never get back.
Well, and the question someone asked me before is, well, I don't want to put into an annuity because I need to recover, right? And the rule, and I was looking at some old notes for somebody. I was like, well, the market has done pretty well theoretically, and we're told buy low, sell high. And the big question I like to ask is, are we in a high or low? And could something like this happen? I don't know, with another tech stock that we're in. I don't know.
Good point. Great stuff. So, guys, this is one more, I guess, straw on the camel's back, but home prices are now hitting another high. Okay, while mortgage rates are slightly coming down, even as the Fed keeps rates up. But according to Freddie Mac, there's a Fox Business article here that discusses the state of the real estate market with home record prices now, and with slightly lower mortgage rates. So the lower your mortgage, the more you can pay for that house. That's why more and more Americans bought McMansions in the early 2000s, because the rates were coming down so you could get the bigger and bigger square footage, and that can sometimes be a bear trap. But let me pass the ball over to Amanda on this one. Is the market about to see another correction?
I'm not sure about that, but I did want to come back to Evan said something earlier about debt and how because of inflation, he's getting serious about debt, right? And I wanted to show, this is from Freddie Mac. This is from their website. As soon as it loads, I feel like I'm having some connection issues today. Sorry about
It's
this,
loaded.
guys.
You sound
Okay, it's not
clear on our side anyway. The audio
Okay.
sounds great.
So it says interest rates on credit cards in blue, on auto loans in green, and then the gray is 30-year fixed mortgages.
Is there any way you could zoom in to get the sidebar out of the way, just so we can get a good, clean picture of what those numbers are right there? Because it's kind
Yeah, is
of
that
hard,
better?
small to see. Yeah, a little bit better there. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mark, you just said that mortgage rates are coming down. They're still high, relatively. We only look back to 2010. Now, if we go back to the 80s, they're definitely much lower than they were then.
Yeah. Let's all go back to the 80s, man.
But like, just to put that in perspective, right? Like, if people are getting serious about debt, right? Like, which debt are you going to get serious about? How is inflation impacting these? And see this increase too. There's been a higher increase in credit cards than there has been in others. So let's get those out of our lives for sure. And then I'll pull up that article that you had, Mark, from about that has some other better information than Freddie. They don't have a lot of graphs on their website, but my computer's being really slow. I'm trying to do too much at once. So
no problem.
If you want
me to share anything, that's fine. Do you want me to pull up the Fred link?
That's what I was just looking at, but you could open up the Fox one that you put in.
Investopedia? Oh, Fox. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's all right. The Freddie Mac one, I think, is just fine. It just shows, where things are headed. I think that chart you showed is great, but it kind of, again, underscores the fact that rates are up. And even though the stock market is going up, which we're going to talk about next, I really think we're struggling as a country to afford this lifestyle. And I don't know, have we gotten to a point where folks are going from steak dinners to chicken dinners to dog food? Have we gotten to that point yet? I don't know, but I think that day is coming. If the prices keep going up, more and more people are living paycheck to paycheck. And in fact, according to Investopedia and according to the Fed, let me share my screen here, and you guys can see what we're looking at. Share screen. The Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, has a nice chart that sort of shows the total public debt as a percentage of GDP. And right now, it's as high as it's been in a very long time, only preceding or since COVID, and really ever since before that as well. So again, we've now hit a record $17 trillion in debt as a country. And this is a new report that shows that the total household debt in the United States has reached an all-time high, fueled by rising mortgage balances, so people taking out bigger mortgages because the prices of houses are going way up, and significant crushing student debt. And I think the Investopedia article that I found this on, talks about what this all means for the economy. Like if folks can't pay their mortgage payment, hello 2008 all over again.
Mm.
So Evan, what do you think as you look at this chart?
It is shocking to me, anyways. I was actually looking at it earlier this morning, and my eyes went to obviously 2020, where it just like it shot right up.
Wow.
But also, I just noticed the sheer volume down there at the bottom is absolutely outrageous. And I mean, volume was pretty bad for the previous decades before that, but just since 2010, it's just absolutely gone bonkers. And so I'm really, I don't, as far as like getting that under control and figuring out how we can, as a country, get that under check, it's going to be an interesting play out, I think.
So look at the years 1970 and 1973 to 75 and 1980. There, all those gray bars. Amanda, you study the Fred website quite a bit. What are these gray bars? Can you tell us?
Oh, they're recessions, Mark.
Okay, so the gray bars, and for those that can't see, when do you start seeing the public debt going up during recessions? I found this to be really intriguing. The first time I see public debt starting to go up during a recession was in the mid 80s to late 80s. And then 1990, we had a short recession. 2000, there's the tech crash there. Every single time our country goes through a recession, what happens to the public debt? It goes up.
Skyrockets.
Why is that? Well, that's pretty obvious. If you've lost your job during a recession, you got to take out debt to cover the bills, right? But what I find interesting, I want to get Amanda's opinion on this. Why in the 1970s were we able to survive these two recessions? Like there's 70 through 72 and then 74 and 75 recession and the 1980 recession too. Why were we able to survive all this without going into further debt? How?
Well, could it be because of where we stored our money?
Say some more about that.
Yeah. So if you go pre-1980, people had these awesome things called whole life insurance with a cash value. That if I just lost my job, I don't have to run to the bank or run to the credit card. I can use my cash value and take a policy loan, get through that emergency. That's not going to show up as a public debt.
Wow. Great point. Yeah.
And then, but like since then, like 1980, we get 401ks. We're shoving our money into there. We're being told buy term and invest the difference. We've got our money in the stock market. When one of these recessions hits, what happens to our 401k? What happens to our stocks when we just lost our job at the same time? They're down. We don't want to sell. We don't, right? And so what's the alternative? Well, I'll take out the debt. I don't have to sell. I'll just go into debt.
I didn't even know you'd take us there, but that is such I totally agree with you, Amanda. I think that is exactly right. Isn't that interesting that we now have to rely on public debt whenever we go through a hard time? We don't have a way to bank on ourselves in the midst of the downturns, anymore. And I'm just shocked at the 2020 recession. I'll hush after this, Brandon. I'll pass it to you. But look at the sharp upsurge there. That giant, in 1 month, we had like a 1 month recession or whatever, the mini session. And yet look at all that debt we had to we were so razor thin right before the storm, the economic storm, that we had to fall on our knees to the credit card companies. And then the government, of course, gives us tons of money so we can pay that debt down. But now look at what it's doing. It's climbing back up again to $17 trillion, a record high. Brandon.
Well, they gave us all that money, and now we're dealing with the consequences too, right? That's part of the problem, right? But if you think about it, is like whenever we were able to be okay with those crises in the past, then we created the credit card companies that was like, oh, we'll give you that, and we became more consumeristic, buying widgets and everything, more and more and more, and dependent on that. And then what I'm really concerned about is, we're in a political crazy world, and regardless of who is elected, I was thinking about this morning. We're going to blame whoever's elected about some of the problems. I don't care who it is, and really we see the writing on the wall. I don't care who gets elected. We have a big problem that we've been creating for years and years and years and years. Nobody is going to solve it as far as presidents go.
What problem? I don't see a problem.
Well,
That's what we're going to do about it, right?
We've had these financial gurus telling us you better pay down your debt, right? Keep only $1,000 in your emergency fund and and pay off your debt, and then start putting in your 401k. We've been taught this for 40 years, and how many people actually do it? And how much is that like shoving that message down people's throat actually working too, right? Like in the way that it's presented. I love saving money because I know I can tap into it. I can actually increase my lifestyle. Saving money helps me live a better life, not a worse life in the here and now. And I wish we could tell people more of that, because I'm not losing access to it. I can still use it to take that vacation, to buy that next car, whatever it is. And actually, I can buy the car without paying interest, and I can buy a nicer car, right? Like that's the thing that I feel like we're not teaching our kids. We're not reinforcing to ourselves. We have FOMO, but the way to get out of FOMO is not to spend; it's actually to save.
Or be okay, joy of missing out. Be okay with not having the crazy new gadget or binging on a new show that we have to, get, or whatever subscription.
Right, and there's also the FOMO of the markets. I wanted to talk about this because the S&P 500 has been hitting record highs all year long in the midst of all these things we're talking about. And so everybody like that. What problem is legit? What investors feel? They're like, but my stocks are at an all-time high, and they keep hearing an all-time high, right? Like keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
What do we have to say about that?
I think as far as like covering your head, putting your head in the sand, all that, those people who are, if they do that, they're going to have a harsh reality, hit them one day. And because we're eventually and whoever is in that boat is going to get to a point where they don't have any other choices or any other options. And so that's, you can see that happening as the economy is correcting and whatnot. And so it's going to be those, I think, who have had that discipline of saving, who have, and not just saving in any old fashion, but saving using something that has the added benefits of uninterrupted compound growth, like Bank on Yourself does. This strategy is going to allow those who have saved diligently the opportunity to really, I'll spin it this way, take and help a lot of people in a really desperate position get something instead of nothing. And they're also going to get it at a really good deal. And that has happened time and time again throughout history, especially in real estate. You see that a lot with, cash is king. All of those different kinds of terms are said in that arena. And it is what is allowing those people to scoop up these really great deals are those who have cash, who've been diligent, who've saved.
Evan, you made a statement about saving, and that kind of brings us to our next article. But before I jump there, Amanda, you're showing us something that looks pretty important here on the screen. What are you seeing here?
Yeah. So from 2021, right, the S&P 500 I think was negative 22% in 2022, and then started increasing in 2023. But look at these record highs. How many of them there have been this year? Do we think the market is high or low? Right?
Wow.
When's the next one going to hit? Or could we have something like a nice break where who knows what's going to happen next, right? And this is just Wikipedia, right? It's just an article, closing milestones of the S&P, and you can see like try to look for patterns here. See what you think about this. The data is out there. I just find it really interesting, right? How many of these in a row after such a break between? And then if you also look at when it's hit, like it has these milestones, 1,000, 2,000, like between the 1,000 and 2,000 was how many years? Right?
Wow.
16 years.
Yeah.
But then
Jeez.
and then it's like 5 years, 3 years, 3 years, or 2 years, 3 years, right? Like
Wow.
how quickly do we think this can go? And also, how long do we think this can last? I'm done. Go on to the next thing.
That's a mic drop right there, Amanda. Yeah, and Evan, you've given us this idea about saving, and the next headline was New York Times article says that the retirement crisis is even worse than you think because a new report shows that half of all American households won't have enough money to maintain their lifestyle in retirement. So why is that? Well, it says the article goes on to say it's due to a combination of factors, including rising healthcare costs, inadequate savings, Evan, and longer lifespans. So are we at the precipice where we're about to see the breaking point? I mean, you could really look back over the last 50 years and say, well, there's been a lot of things that have caused this. And, we've talked about multiple inputs here where lots of things like inflation and, corporate greed and things like that too, and taxes going up. But we are at a point now where half of Americans won't have the same standard of living. So what does that mean? That means not going out to eat, not seeing your friends, not getting hamburger. You're going to have to deal with, like vegetables only or chicken only or whatever else. You're downgrading your lifestyle, maybe just eating every other night. I don't want that for my clients. What about you guys? What are you seeing as you read through this article and as you kind of look at the state of the retirement readiness of Americans and with your clients?
So I was listening to an article or a podcast, and it was the guy named Ted Benna, and he said that Ted Benna, he was the creator of the 401k, and he said the reason I liked him, what was so impactful on this, was it made people quote unquote save. It forced them to save. And the challenging thing is people are starting to realize that some of that forced savings in a 401k hasn't worked out for them. So they're opting out altogether. And some is their lifestyle hasn't really led up to, they've been living well above their means. Debt, right, is increasing. And this is one of the reasons we wrote our book, the 5 Smooth Stones book, is to make sure that we are saving and building a plan. And maybe you create within the policies a forced savings that still is accessible, not waiting until you're 60, because we've saved in those forced savings and then something happens. And guess what we have to do? Take a penalty or whatever to get out of paying for food, right, with a 401k or something. And I think that's the biggest challenge is we've been kind of told, don't worry about it, just put into this. And we thought we were doing everything right, our parents, and now we're not.
But doesn't the stock market give us 10% a year?
That's what Dave says. But
if you think that, call me.
Well, but you can look it up, guys. I mean, I'll play devil's advocate. Look up S&P calculator last 100 years average return is going to be 10%. You're going to find that every decade or whatever. The average return was 10%. That's a 10-year time span. So that's plenty of time to wash out the recessions and the change in value. If you go back to that S&P, you don't have to pull it up again there, Amanda, but you'd see it's about 10% return. So what's the problem?
The CrowdStrike or whatever that was that happened like 2 days ago.
Amanda's got it. Yeah. What's that?
No volatility. Yeah.
What's that, Amanda?
I mean, volatility eats away. I was actually just showing somebody what we learned from the one and only Mr. Les Himmel, that you can make 8% and still lose money. You can have a positive 8% return. If you do the math, up 56.
You got to talk us through that.
Yeah. Maybe I'll pull up a thing, but most people use a straight line projection, 8% every year, but we know the market doesn't do that, right? It goes up some, down some, right? All over the place. And if you can, let's say you went up, I think it's like 56, down 48, something like that. You end up with 8%, but you actually end up with less than you started. You lost money.
Yeah.
And that's not even factoring in fees, right? It's not even factoring in you didn't touch your money, right? Because most people increases of withdrawals from 401ks to combat inflation and get through rough financial times are on the rise as well. People aren't leaving this money to grow for even 10 years. They're touching it, they're withdrawing from it. And that's also not factoring in that you don't fund it day one for your 30 years until retirement. You put a little bit in over time. So you're also not, it's right. People love to simplify things to make them feel really easy, but the real results are very different.
Awesome. So Amanda, if you want, I can share a visual of what you just said. So this is the compound return versus the average return. This is the real, yield of the, in this case, the market. If you were to put money back in 1900, what would you have today? 1.3 million or something like that. But in the real world, that's an average of 6% compounding. That orange line is what financial advisors love to show you. But reality is, as Amanda said, volatility. The blue line is what you actually get. Both of these lines, orange and blue, give you a 6% return. Orange is what investors think they get, but blue is what they really get because there's so much, coiled up viper in the portfolio. When you squeeze and twist that return of up and down, that breaks the compounding and it squeezes everything into a smaller, tighter number. And you have less money as a result. Now, most people think they're getting that orange number when they're 22 years old and they're handed their first 401k and they're saying, okay, wow, if I just put away my X dollars per month, I'll have Y dollars by retirement. They think they're going to get that big, juicy orange number, way up in the stratosphere, but they open up their account statement 40 years later and it's too little too late.
Well, and when we met you, Mark, we were strong advocates of Susie Orman. And she's one that says that a lot, along with Dave, saying, oh, well, that's what it's going to do. And then you run the math, and these people have listened to them on the radio shows or whatever. And they're like, oh, well, they are, of course they know. But they're experts. They're experts, right? And so we've listened to them and so, okay, well, and that's the hard part in our industry. We just say, oh, well, they're the experts. I'll give it to them to think. And that's the hardest part in my job is I want to educate my clients to think and give them ownership of their own life. But most people want a quick fix or just me just to tell them what they need to do and it'll all work out like magic. And the reality is that's not the way the world works or math.
And I'll give you back to screen share, but this was what I was referring to.
Fine.
One of my favorite things. You can, in fact, lose money with an 8% average. This black line is still an 8% average rate of return. And yet there's only $72 when we started with 100 at year zero.
Whoa.
And we didn't touch it.
Not factoring in anything like fees.
Or taxes or anything.
Taxes.
Yep.
That's
okay, back over to you, Mark. I think you got something else to share.
Oh, this might just for the nerds that want to see actual numbers. Hey, these charts are fine, but folks can lie on a chart. So let's look at some actual numbers. Here's the final numbers of the S&P 500. You have a 9.13% return.
Can you zoom in on that?
So what are we looking at here? This is just the history of the S&P 500 with dividends from year 2000 down to 2021. So a good 2 decades. The average annual return was 9.1%. That's with dividends, by the way. So make sure you're reinvesting those. If you have a S&P 500 index fund or whatever, make sure that's happening. If you had $1 million in there, by the end of 21 years, you'd have 3.9 million. Somebody tell me, that's with a 1% expense factor. Now, somebody tell me, how did I get a real return of 6.46 if the stock market gave me 9.13? Where did all that money go? Volatility. Yeah. The change in value of your portfolio is different than what the market itself did. It's sort of like when you're driving, you have to go left and right, north and south, east and west, stop at the red light, stop at the stop sign, stop whenever ducks are crossing the road. You got to have a lot of lost energy when you're going up and down, left and right. But when you're flying over all those stop signs and ducks crossing the street, you can go straight to where you need to go, and there's no volatility. It's a linear path, and that means a lot less fuel having to be spent, or in this case, rate of return having to be wasted. Okay, Amanda, let's jump all the way down to our last topic of the day here. Is college worth it? According to Pew Research in 2024, this is May of 24, so very recent survey done. Is college worth it? Drop the bomb on us. What's the statistic there? And talk about what we're looking at here.
Oh, you share your screen. I'll tell a quick story. So this is legit concern. We talked about, we're going to talk about this in an upcoming podcast episode. So teaser, like real life people are making the choice for a couple months from now, starting college, right? Whether they go to the school they got into that's a private school, or maybe the community college close to them. And if the private school takes some loans to have happen, is it worth it? I've talked to several people within the last couple months that are making that real decision right now. So I'm glad you brought this up, Mark. It's a very timely topic because college starts, the clock is ticking for a lot of freshmen.
Why do you think this is, that it's worth it even with loans? Is only 22% of people. 47% say if I pay cash for my college, it'll be worth it. And then, now 30% of people say, hey, no matter what, whether I pay cash or debt, I'm not going to college, is what now 29% of the survey says. What's going on there? Why this surge in people saying, such a small percentage of people saying, hey, it's worth it to go into debt for college?
My initial response would be specialized education. I don't know. I was talking about that with my wife. Actually, we have 3 kids, and what are we going to encourage our kids to do as far as student loans go? Am I going to help them with that? Or are they going to need to do it on their own? Figuring out all that is important before they get there. Hopefully a lot of people take that as a bit of advice and actually do that. But having a degree these days, it is important for some professions, but ultimately some, especially as an entrepreneur, for real estate investing, you don't necessarily have to have a business degree. I do have one, but maybe I could have done it without all of the student loans and all of the extra cost of college. I could have put that into real estate, and maybe I would be better off financially than I am right now. So it also, wanted to say this, is education in high school has changed drastically, and there's no kid left behind policies now, where now they're letting kids graduate who maybe didn't actually meet the criteria, and now colleges are having to adjust their curriculum to accommodate for students who maybe shouldn't actually be there. So anyway, I'll pause right there and let somebody else jump in.
Yeah, I think those points are all really valid, and you can see some of the other infographics. This 4 in 10 Americans say a college degree is not, what does it say?
Is not too or not at all important in order to get a well-paying job.
Well-paying job, yeah. And even the next one will show young men who don't have a college degree, their wages have increased more in the last 10 years than those with a degree. So real data there, but also let's go back to where we started from today, interest rates. If I'm taking
Yep.
college loans right now, I'm paying way more interest rates than I would have 5 years ago, and for those loans. And especially, sure, I can get the federal, maybe I can get some subsidized, but those Parent Plus loans that my parents might take, or the private loans that my parents might co-sign on for me because I'm only 18. Why would anybody else give me money? They're huge. The interest rates on there and when you actually do the math, I was doing this with a mom recently, we put in the amount they'd have to take out in loans. We looked at the interest, and she's like, college doesn't just cost 40,000 in loans. It costs $100,000 a year after I paid back that interest.
Wow. Yeah. Great points. I mean, so guys, as we have 1 minute left, really, how does Bank on Yourself solve some or even most of what we've been, bemoaning today? How do you see, on a one-on-one individual basis, one family at a time, you're helping people break out of some of these problems? Quick takeaway, maybe 1 or 2 sentences. Love to hear just a quick summary from everybody on the call here.
Yeah. I'll go first because it relates to that mom I was talking to. She started a Bank on Yourself type whole life policy 5 years ago with me when we were first starting. And she gets to use that to help her kid go to college, at least, test it out, see how it works.
Great.
And and not committing long term, but at least the first year, right? And be able to test the waters without taking as much risk and paying as much interest. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Steve Brandt keeps texting me because he's watching, but he had mentioned that.
Tell him to leave a comment in the show. Anyway, go ahead.
He is
Hi,
not
Steve.
logged in. Apparently, he's saying all kinds of stuff. Many people are opting out of college because no matter where they end up with a job, those employees will have to train them anyway. Right. And so I think about me. You guys are all overeducated in my eyes. Every one of you guys have masters in all of this or degree bachelors. And for me, I'm like, I'm not. But the thing I wanted to end with is volatility, the market, all of this stuff, even 529, they're all interconnected. And taxes, Stephen mentioned taxes, all of these things. I wonder if a lot of times people are realizing, oh, this has all been a sham for the past 30 years and something's not right. And so there are ways to build a good foundation. That's why we're here. So
great
and
stuff,
then
Evan.
I'll go back and just say, the forced savings dynamic of Bank on Yourself really does allow for people to, whether, I mean, obviously, I'll go back to this saying that we say all the time as Bank on Yourself professionals, like, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Right now. If you haven't planted the tree already, like 20 years ago, go ahead and start saving now and allow that tree to grow into a forest with a Bank on Yourself policy, because the uninterrupted compounding growth is exponential, and it just really, and without losing access to your money, because I'll say it again, cash is king. Whenever those investment opportunities come, whenever the market is down or it looks good, at least to buy in and jump on, if you're going to invest in the stock market or real estate, that is going to be the best time to have a whole bunch of cash saved up right now. So yeah, check it out. Check
Good.
it out, the tree.
My takeaway is, let's all go back to the 80s. So everybody, thanks so much. We'll bring our pogs and our slap bracelets and our NES cartridges with us. So you guys, awesome stuff. I'll let Amanda give us the final send off, and thanks so much for having me on, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. And for those who don't want to go back to the 80s, let's make brighter futures together. It's up to us. Don't wait on anybody else to do it for you. Reach out to one of us to help you along the way, but don't forget, it's on you. This is your future that we're talking about, and no one's take it more seriously than you do. So make it happen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Talk to you soon.